Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician.
My name is Bendler. I'm a film and stage actor and a pop culture enthusiast.
I'm Anne Milleville, a French screenwriter and producer.
Today's VHS selection is On the Waterfront from 1954, written by Bud Schulberg and directed by Elia Kazan. This film really is kind of it's a tried and true classic, I would dare say, not just from the era in which it was produced, but what it did in cinema and all the elements involved that we're going to explore today. So once again, if you have not seen On the Waterfront, I strongly recommend that you check out the Visually Hidden Selects episode on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel. Subscribe so you don't miss any further selections, and then watch the movie. Come on back to the podcast because we are going to be discussing it in depth at length with spoilers. Here we go. So I had first been aware of this movie. Of course, it has the famous scene in the cab with Brando, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But that's really, I think, the most iconic contribution this film has going for it. But I first saw it when I was in high school. I was taking this film studies course, and this was one of the movies that they showed. And it's probably the best takeaway from that class for me because, again, I had not seen it. I was barely aware of it. And it really stuck out to me as just something significant. I couldn't really put my finger on it at the time, but I knew that there was a lot of inherent value in this film. And as I grew older and revisited it and checked it out over the years, it just came more into focus for me as a important and significant and enjoyable film on a number of different levels.
For me, this one was always one of those that you heard about in the overall conversation of, greatest movies you should probably see type of a situation. And I hadn't gotten to it maybe 4 years ago. I was like, you know what, let me just go check this movie out because I hear so many good things about it. And when I first saw it, I loved it. I can't say that I didn't. It's just it's so stupid to me that I don't own this movie. So I'm probably gonna have to rectify that very soon.
And it was the first time for me that I watched this movie. So I heard about it a lot, actually, on the Waterfront. The title was known because when you read books or you watch shows on cinema, they refer to this film a lot. So I was intrigued to watch it. And as you said in the VHS video, it's not just a classic. It's a very solid story. So yeah, I'm glad I could discover it thanks to you. And I was a bit stressed to watch a black and white movie. As I said in the episode about Charlie Chaplin, I'm not a huge fan of black and white movies. But the story is really solid, really interesting. So you get over it. And actually, I didn't feel it was outdated. What I loved about the story is that it's a strong story. You have many topics addressed in the story and great characters. And I love the realism in it by the sets and also the topics that really talks to everybody, I think. And also the music has a kind of an energy that keep you in the moment. And really everything works in this story for me to get entertained.
I think it's an interesting thing. Like you said, that the topics, especially in this film, it doesn't feel dated. It still works today. And Elia Kazan, I've watched a few of his. One of my favorites of his is East of Eden. I think that he does a really good job of letting the relationships kind of blossom on their own. And I think that that's where the realism kicks in for a lot of people. As a director, Pete, you know this. You're going to try to get the best person for the job, right? To the best of your ability, right? Whoever comes out in auditions or whatever the case may be. And I think he finds really good people for these roles and then lets them let me do my job, basically. And he lets Brando do his job. Mm-hmm. He lets Karl Malden do his job. And I think once you've done that, that's when the realism kind of spills over, off the screen and into the audience. This movie specifically might be, decades old, but the material seems so fresh and so real because, yes, we're still dealing with some of this kinds of element in real life still. But when it's done well, when it's not labored over or stressed or forced, it seems very natural, very real. And I think that's the quality that makes it endure all those years.
Just the approach to the film. It was filmed on location in Hoboken, New Jersey, and that wasn't the norm of the day. They didn't really start filming. I think the first film actually shot on location was called The Window. It was filmed in 1948. It wasn't released until a couple years later. And then there was another movie called The Naked City that came out like shot after it, released before it. And those are really kind of the first feature films to be shot on location, specifically in the New York City area. Before that, it was all Hollywood or it was all sets. And then as television came into play in the 1950s, they started opening up that window into the world. I think that is a big part of the authenticity and the realism is the setting and the location and the supporting actors and the character actors and the background extras. It's very unique for that time period when you're watching it and you can see like the dead trees all around. It's winter time and you can, it's not fabricated in a studio where like if they were making a winter scene, they would have to like, it would be on a set and it would look a little cheap or fake or staged. And this is like, you can just see for miles the depth of the blocks in the city and even specifically on the docks and the waterfront. The other thing that I really, really love about this story is how it like almost literally hits the ground running. Like right from the beginning, we're in this story. We're in this situation with Terry. He goes and he sets up Joey Doyle and he thinks he's just going to get roughed up. And 30 seconds later, we see him taking a nosedive off the roof. That's how the film begins. It's just such a strong opening, and right away we're in the middle of this and Terry is cast into this world of conflict that he has to navigate and all this guilt and everything that drives the movie. There's not a whole lot of superfluous story and character development. It just jumps right in with both feet and it keeps on running, through to the very end. It just keeps pushing. And that's one thing that really stuck out to me the first time I saw it. And one reason why I love sharing it with people and recommending it is because you're never bored.
I can't argue with that. The pacing is impeccable. There's moments where this story feels very big, specifically when they're on the docks and all the workers are there and they're fighting either for the day's pay or they're trying to stand up to friendly or whatever the case may be. And then there's times where the story feels very small and very personal. And I think that's a very interesting and cool dynamic to have in a film starring Marlon Brando, because at the time he was it. He was the guy to get. So it's a really skillful thing to manage and not make the whole thing feel too overbloated or make the whole thing feel too small and undercut it.
That's how life is too, It's like you have all your problems out in the world with your job or your career, your friends, your aspirations, your school. But then you come home and you close your door and there's your world, in those few rooms. And those are the people that you deal with, in a different way. So I think that also just that scope is really well executed in this film, like the scope of life.
Indeed.
Yeah, regarding the direction also, I think it's interesting to see that there is I wanted to say an effort, maybe it's not the right word, but an effort to have different camera angles. And in some scenes you have alternatively the high and low camera angle. I think it's really, I love the dynamic of it. And there's a shot I really do love. I think it's my favorite scene of the movie is when at the very beginning, just after Joey's death, when you have Terry, Charley, and guys working for Johnny Friendly aligned, and you see that Terry is kind of devastated by what just happened, and the others are like minimizing what he feels, his guilt. So just by this shot, you understand that Terry is going to be apart from the rest of the gang, and he wants to be part of it, but he's like the fifth wheel of the gang by his attitude, by his words, by his clothes, and by his position in the queue. Everything is it's really well done for me, this shot.
I agree with you. I think with Kazan, the thing, again, I've watched, I think, 3 or 4 of his movies this week. I'm going to watch another one probably tonight. I think what you're saying is spot on. A great sign of a really great director is you forget that they're there. Like some directors feel like they have to put their stamp on things and that you have to know that this is their film. And that's okay. There's a place for that type of stuff. Stylistic stuff is great in certain ways. But I think Kazan really knows how to zero in on what size shot to have and what you need to be seeing to really feel feel the effect of the story. And in that way, he becomes invisible. In that sense, Kazan's great because the angles in some of these shots are beautiful and they're smart and they evoke the right emotion. And in that, like I said, in that sense, he disappears and it's just about the story.
Yeah, and the characters and their presentation. I mean, he came up from theater and he was a pioneer of the method acting approach, which is one reason why he really connected with Brando. Just using the characters to tell the story.
The character of Terry for me is a very complex one. That's what I really loved in this film. The fact that you start with a guy who says he's a bum. He says himself like he's a bum, but actually you discover that he's really more than that. And throughout the film, you have pleasure to discover his personality, his past, and the guy is becoming, because he changes a lot during the movie. I really felt bad for this character and hopeful during all the movie. The fact that he didn't have a family, he's looking for a family through Johnny Friendly and the gang. You totally understand that he is caught between two stools all along until the end. And I didn't really know Marlon Brando before this movie, but you should watch it just for Marlon Brando performance. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I watch him and the subtleties that he does or pulls off in this movie are unbelievable. The understanding, not just understanding of the emotion for the scene, but the transitions in between, getting from one emotion to another, that could be a really tough thing. Is how do I go through that and make it seem like it's like I actually felt it and it was normal and it was organic. And some actors struggle to get that done, and some emotions are easier for them than others. But his transitions, I don't think enough could be said about those. A lot of it happens if you watch him in the way he breathes. What you think you feel with him, and especially in this performance, is you feel like he's really listening to whoever's talking to him, whatever other character it is on the screen. He's taking that in, and when he breathes in, you could feel like he's absorbing whatever they're giving him, and then he's making his next choice dependent upon that. I think that's kind of where the magic for him happens. Like, and everyone talks about the cab scene, and that's fucking brilliant. Like we had said in the video, Pete, it really is it's a ping pong match. Man, they're going back and forth, and yeah, you're not going to get the Brando end of things without the Steiger end of things. But it's that listening, Brando's listening and breathing and connecting the dots between those emotions. I think that's where the brilliance of that performance lies.
I think Brando as the lead in this film really helps set the tone. And then just the other characters around him, Karl Malden as Father Barry, Rod Steiger as his brother Charley, Lee J. Cobb as John Friendly, and even Eva Marie Saint. This was her first film. She had done a lot of theater. She was a New York theater actress, and they saw her and liked her and brought her into the film, and she crushes. Like for never having been on film, because Steve, you've walked in both worlds. There's a big difference between theater and film, not just craft and technique, but there's a big technical difference between the two, and the repetition of one over the other. And then when you're dealing with method actors who want to find it through improvisation, that doesn't always complement the theatrical approach of being, on book and off book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to navigate those waters, I think, Eva Marie Saint really did an exceptional job right out of the gate.
Well, the fact that she just didn't get swallowed up by Brando's presence is a feat in itself, because even when he's not talking, he has this electric kind of quality about him. And the fact that she held her own, and not just held her own, but actually excelled, and they had good chemistry. So the fact that Kazan saw that that's going to work. And then she wasn't the typical, wilting flower who needed help. She held her own in regards to, like, I want to know who did this to my brother. And she never wavered on that. Even when her emotions for Terry grew, she needed to have that closure. And the fact that it didn't get thrown by the wayside in the scripts. And that was a crucial piece of Terry figuring out how he wanted to live the rest of his life, who he wanted to become. You watch Terry grow up in the course of the film. He's kind of just a lost kid in a lot of ways, and then he just finally, stuff happens to him in just the right way where he discovers that, like, I don't want to be that anymore. I want to be something better than that. And I think the backbone of that is the Edie character. She's the catalyst for that change. I mean, obviously also him being duped about Joey and all that stuff that helped with the change, but her being that constant, unwavering principled character. She wasn't distracted by anything else, feelings aside. That spoke to Terry, and that's what brought those things out in him, and that's what causes the change.
And when you think about it, she's the only woman in the cast. But I was surprised because I was pretty sure at the beginning of the movie that you're going to see some woman around Johnny Friendly, because this type of guys have usually bad attitudes with bad attitudes with women. But no, she's the only one. So just for that, I mean, it's really a great performance. At some scenes, sometimes I felt like she was kind of overacting, but I thought then maybe it's the attitude of women at that time. You know, that's also a movie from the 50s, and women don't react the same way nowadays. So maybe that's the point. But on her performance and her character, there is nothing bad to say about her, really.
You're right. I mean, it's a performance of the time for sure. Acting has changed over the years.
Yeah.
But I think also maybe it is because of the time frame and how women were looked upon. So she had to be a bit bolder when she said stuff to make sure people were listening to her.
There's a whole lot going on in this film, and a lot of it just comes down through the characters. You know, if you have Terry in the middle who's like struggling between these two paths of good, you know, righteousness and like dark, you know, corruption. And it's almost like a tug of war between Edie and Father Barry and Charley and John Friendly, you know, and they're constantly pulling back and forth on Terry. And as things escalate, you know, especially with Charley, kind of goes south. And then in the end, really is when Terry has to just stand his ground for himself. And Father Barry is like the coach in the corner trying to get him back on his feet.
Yeah, Father Barry, I mean, Karl Malden, he plays the part with such conviction that when he's talking to, is it Dugan, about like standing up or not standing up, and the audience believes him. I'll be there till the end. I'll see the whole thing through.
Yeah.
And you buy it. And I always say, if the actor believes it, the audience believes it. If the audience believes it, you got nothing to worry about. And you believe his convictions. And I think so when you have a pillar of goodness on that one side for Terry, and Terry knows that John Friendly is pretty much the pillar of bad, but his feelings are mixed up because they're friends, right? Friendly. And then his brother is there. And I think that's part of the problem with Terry is he's just kind of coasting through life because he didn't really have any convictions about anything.
The thing that really stands out about Karl Malden's character, though, is like he is that strong pillar. You know, he is the pillar of righteousness. When he's reading everybody the riot act in the hull of the boat, and they're just pelting him, they're just like really throwing stuff, and you see it like splatter off of him. You know, like that's a testament to his character. And then when he feels the heartbreak for Terry, when Terry reveals the truth to Edie, you know, and he's watching them from afar. Even after everything goes down with Charley and the father confronts Terry in the bar, Terry has the gun and he's, you know, going looking for John Friendly, and Terry tells him to go to hell, and the father just slaps him off his chair, and this is a prize fighter.
Yeah.
And Father Barry knocks him on his ass. Yeah. You know, like, I'm not going to step to Father Barry.
Right.
You know, but like that's like the strength of his character, and it's kind of the same as John Friendly. It's like mirrored, you know, with the angel on the shoulder and the devil on the shoulder. They're balancing and doing their dance, but like they are kind of the opposites in this film. And then you get a level closer and you have Edie and Charley in that intimate relationship with Terry.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, and again with the Karl Malden character, that's what Terry was lacking in his life, was someone with principles and conviction. Because Friendly and those guys didn't really have that. You know, they just had their rules, their law, their ways, and if you didn't go with them, then you got taken out. You know, that's so. I mean, I guess you could call that principle to a certain degree, but not really, not in the truest sense of the word. And I think Terry discovered he didn't want to be a person without principles anymore, or a person without some kind of you know, an inherent goodness, and not just floating in this middle abyss of like, well, this is kind of how life is, and that's all that there is. So I think that's pivotal. You know, the Karl Malden character, and in extension of that, the Edie character became very pivotal for his growth.
And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
For me, this movie is an illustration of what we say that you are people that surrounds you. I don't know if you say that, but we say that a lot here. So when you're around negative people, you become negative, and if you have positive attitudes around you, you're gonna be positive. That's the thing. Because at the beginning, he was a sheep. He was following Charley, and because Charley was negative in a way because he was following Johnny Friendly. So this negative attitude, this negative environment was his life. So he was in it. He didn't question himself about what he was doing. He had a blind loyalty to those guys. And when Father Barry and Eddie entered Terry's life, yes, actually, maybe then he noticed that that's what he wanted in his life. And he became someone he wasn't at the beginning. He became a new man thanks to those guys, these strong figures around him.
Yeah, when you're in that life and you live like that, you don't realize from an outside perspective how bad it is, or you're not conscious of it. But I think the thing with the fights for me is I think deep down inside, from a selfish point of view, Terry knows that taking the dive in those fights was wrong, and it affected him deeper, and he knew it shouldn't have gone down like that. And I think he wished that he had the courage to stand up, but he just didn't. That was the gateway for someone like a Father Barry or an Edie to come in.
That was Terry's world. And it was only through the confrontation with Joey Doyle that it really pushed him beyond that level of acceptance. It's like that confrontation with mortality connected with his morality. And that's what really kind of like snapped him out of that mindset and that lifestyle. You know, it's like he had never had to do that before. And even when he was fighting, he was the dive guy. He was never the killer.
Yeah.
You know, he was never like Terry the Killer Malloy going out there busting heads. You know, he took the dive. So he was always kind of the patsy. But now it's resulted in the death of somebody he actually knew. And I think that's what snaps him out of it. And then when he's sent undercover into the church to spy on the little plot that Father Barry and Edie are cooking up, he starts to listen and connect. And it's really like Father Barry becomes the new shepherd, but Edie is really, I think, what lures him into that. It's his admiration for her and his attraction to her, not just physically, but just as a person of like good standing and, you know, coming from that same neighborhood, and she's doing good. Like, how do I do that? You know, I'm going to hang around and shadow this person because they seem to have a better grasp on life than I do.
One of the things I liked about the Edie and Terry thing is how organic it was. It didn't feel, oh, we got to make the audience believe that these people are, you know, falling in love with each other. No, it was effortless. And that's the best kind of relationship on a screen, is when it's effortless. It feels like it's happening right in front of your eyes for the first time organically. And there wasn't a moment of that relationship that I didn't buy. You know, because, you know, she pulls away at moments, and then, you know, he has his moments where he doubts himself, and she tells him you're probably better than you think you are. And so there's a bit of a push and a pull that makes it feel like a genuine conversation for one, and definitely a genuine relationship on top of that.
And the scene with the glove is super cute when he picks up the glove and he dusted it. You know, it's and even tries it. I think he tries it. It's a very cute scene.
I just love the through line of their relationship and how they care for each other, they support each other. There's one point in their relationship where it's like, when he bursts into the apartment and embraces her. That's a little melodramatic.
Oh.
That's a little
bit.
It's a terrible
little
scene.
much.
Yeah.
You know, if I feel I agree. I feel like that scene, if it was exercised from it or dialed back just a little bit, but again, it's a product of its time. And it's a film of its time, and they needed to have this big emotional swell because, again, in theater, you got to do that shit for the back row.
Yeah.
You know, so it has to be big, and that's the approach that they were coming at with it. So I understand it. I accept it. I don't necessarily love that part, but I feel like the other parts around it, specifically the ones I mentioned in the video, I feel like they overshadow that significantly. You know, that romantic embrace, I think, is secondary or even tertiary to the connection in the park and the scene with the glove, and then the confession down on the waterfront.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, definitely a product of its time. Definitely melodramatic, but everything else in the movie is so good. I can just forgive it. It's fine. It's 2 seconds, no big deal. If we're going to talk about relationships, obviously we have to talk about Charley and Terry.
Yeah, let's take the gloves off. Here we go.
Terry and Edie have more time together, and you see that relationship build in front of your eyes, while we have to imagine what Terry and Charley's relationship has been for all these years until we get into that cab. Because Charley
Yeah.
protects him against Friendly, like, oh, well, he's this, and he'll come through and like just protects his brother. And then he's gotten to the point where he realizes we're down to the wire and I can't really protect you anymore. And then that's the point where Terry doesn't want to be protected anymore, realizing that Charley's part of who held him down for a long time. And having to face that is harder than having to face someone like Friendly in a way. Because when it's your family who's been holding you down, or somebody that you love or you look up to or you admire, that's rough. And to have those moments where you have to have that conversation, and that's what that conversation is. The quietness in that scene is what's beautiful about that scene. And what they do for each other in that scene is fantastic. It's an interesting thing because I said we saw the organicness of the Edie Terry thing throughout the entire film, but you get the scope of the relationship between these two guys in like a 5-minute scene, which is almost unheard of. I don't know anyone else who could nowadays is going to write like that. So the writing, the direction, and the acting on the part of all of those people is a perfect storm to create one of the most iconic scenes probably in any film. And Lord knows it's been duplicated and it's been used again. And, it's been, paid tribute to or whatever the case may be. But it's just the performances in that can't be overstated, in my opinion. And some of the best stuff in the movie. And we're talking about a movie that's got a lot of great stuff in it. So that says something.
Yeah, when what you understand during this scene is the emotion through their relationship, because you understand at the beginning of the movie that they are linked somehow, and you understand that they had a difficult past. But that moment is more than words. It's their attitude, the way they look at each other. You understand it's really strong what they had lived together, and now it's the end of it in a way. And as Steve said, that Terry doesn't look for protection anymore, and he says that he disagrees on things and he's going to go to follow his conviction now. And also the fact that he expresses his regret about his past, I think it's really interesting, because from the beginning you feel this guy is a follower. He trusted Charley, and he, as I said previously, he didn't really question himself. And from that point you understand that he had regret about what happened in the past, and that the only rock he had his life put him down in a way. So he's gonna be a new man. He's gonna be taking care of himself. And yeah, it's very strong. I said previously that the best scene for me is the confession between Edie and Terry, but this one also is a pretty good one. So it's good when you have good several good things in a movie. And also his death is the death of Charley is also really emotional, and a good twist in his attitude in Terry's attitude for the rest of the movie. So yeah, definitely Charley. Actually, you don't really care about this character until this moment, until the cab scene and the death.
I don't know if Terry knows the sacrifice Charley's about to make. Like, if he doesn't kill him or bring him in, Charley's going. And I don't know if Terry fully grasps that or if he's aware of it, because I think it would have went down differently. They wouldn't have separated. He would have stuck by him. Almost like to make it up to him, he makes the ultimate sacrifice for his brother.
I think Charley had good intentions all along. He just got wrapped up in the Friendly machine. And really, the scene before the cab scene is really when you really start to see it, when Friendly tells Charley, put him in line or take him offline. And you can see Charley's face in that scene. Like, he's afraid for the reality of his brother's situation at that moment, because he's been running around with this Doyle girl and and talking to people. So you can see between Charley and Friendly that Charley knows what's about to happen. And then that emotion culminates in the back of the cab when he pulls the gun on him, and he just says, "Oh, Charley," and he pushes the gun down. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Terry has already kind of matured past that point. I do feel like, yes, Brando is great, but it's Terry's character that is really
Mhm.
the great part of that scene, because he's bringing all of this to light. He's bringing all of this together. And it's really Steiger's performance in that previous scene leading into this scene
Mhm.
that gives Brando the boost he needs to get to the end of the movie. Like, he's like basically putting his brother on his shoulders and lifting him up to that final confrontation with
No,
Friendly.
I don't
And
disagree with that at all. Yeah.
Steiger, like everything he's doing up to that point, like up until he pulls the gun, is just like, wow, that's like understated, reserved, but
Mhm.
strong. Like, he's
He's
just
playing the game.
running a marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah, right up to the very end. Like, he can't blink
Yeah.
because he'll lose.
And I think that's when he says Charlie and he pushes the gun aside, for me, probably one of, if not the most powerful moments of the film, because you see the growth of Terry there. That's almost like when he steps out of the cab, that's when he's born again. Like, this is like, that was the
Mhm.
final situation for him to go, oh man, you're so lost now. Where Terry was the one who was lost, and now they've switched. And Terry's about to go on to this next thing, but then when Charlie does end up dying, that solidifies the fire in Terry to really go after Friendly.
Oh yeah, because it's a total callback to Joey
Mhm.
Doyle, and it's like, wow, this guy thinks he's
Take
unstoppable,
anybody out.
and you know what? I've been beaten down before. Like, I'll show him what unstoppable
Yeah,
is. Like, I'm gonna stand my ground. I'm gonna keep going.
yeah, absolutely. We didn't talk about Cobb, about really Friendly as an actor. He is so fucking believable as a heavy. There's not one second where I mean, this 12 Angry Men, anything that guy does, you always believe that he is that terrible person. And I think you need somebody like that to feel like this is the guy we have to go up against. And it's not an easy task. And I think he really, Cobb really embodies that in this film.
Yeah, he definitely has the
Hmm.
physicality that you would expect, but then he has the talent to back it up and reinforce it. And when he
Yeah, his voice.
yells, especially at Terry, at the end, he just like calls him out. He's standing on the dock and pointing his finger and yelling at him. And it's like you just hear like that come up from his
Yeah,
diaphragm, like that venom. He spits at him at that moment, and then they just go toe to toe, and he walks away.
yeah.
Terry kind of like has to pull himself together and hobble away, but like that's like the underdog
Hmm.
element of the film. You have to cast that right. And he has it in him to be friendly.
Hmm.
He's John Friendly. He's your buddy. He's your pal. He's looking out for
Yeah.
you, but then he can just, like a switch, like on off. He can throw it, and you can see that in Cobb's career, in you mentioned 12 Angry Men, but also even in The Exorcist, he's the
Hmm.
detective. And he's kind of a good friendly guy. But then in 12 Angry Men, he's kind of like riding that line because Henry Fonda has to work too. And then here we get the full dark side, and even in the scene in the beginning when they're in the pool room in the back, and he's laughing and having a good time, and he's so proud of Terry and great job, kid, and you get to work tomorrow, and you can just set him up with the token and da 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 da. But then that other guy walks in, and he's got bad news for John
You're
Friendly.
right.
And he slaps him around right in front of
Hmm.
everybody, shoves him on his way. Like, it's that
Yeah.
pendulum of a character that I think really comes through with Cobb in this. I don't think everybody could do that.
No, do it effectively and believably. So even if you think you're out of the realm of like, well, he'd never do that to me. No, he'll do it to anybody. Guys like that will do it
Oh
to
yeah,
anybody.
well and that's what Charlie knows in that scene before the
Hmm.
cab when they're talking. He's like, "Oh shit, now I'm on that end of the
Yeah.
stick."
I just wanted to say that the theme of Christianity surprised me in the movie, because nowadays when we talk about religion, it's a bad thing. I mean, not a bad thing, but we judge with modern eyes religion, and because of that, I was expecting that in the movie. I thought, oh, Father Barry's gonna disappoint me somehow, but he did not. So I think it was a good image of Christianity, maybe because of the time period once again, and it was interesting in that matter. But something that I didn't like about this parallel with Christianity is at the end, he makes you understand that the fact that Terry is rising again, it's like the Christ resurrection. And for me, it's a bit too much. I would have preferred that it suggested more than really said.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes into like heavy-handedness, like with the love scene in the apartment. It's like some things, like if they just dialed it back a little bit, but at the same time, it's like at that point, I'm already invested. I'm committed. I'm on board. I really don't care because those seeds have been planted all along the way. And so the fact that the film does have a strong theme of Christianity and a main character who is a priest, but he's not super preachy because in this film and in this context, in this setting, he is really just a voice of morality. He's not saying like, oh, you're going to burn in hell because you do this, that, and the other, and you shouldn't do this, and da da da, da, and shame, shame, shame. Like, he's not doing
He's
that.
not the priest from the Blob.
He's really, yeah. He's really a grounded voice of conscience, and I think that's the best possible line to ride when you're involving religious themes or religious overtones in a film, is like, you don't want to be too preachy. You don't want to ram it down people's throat. You don't want to convert anyone. You want to just kind of present stuff in a plausible, acceptable way. And that's what Father Barry does. And that's what his function is. He's letting Terry make up his own mind. He's guiding him, but he's never, really saying like this, and this, or this, and there are no ultimatums involved. There's cause and effect, and there's right and wrong, and that exploration and that walk. But like, he suggests like, you should tell Edie if it's weighing on your mind and it's a burden on your soul, then you have to get rid of that. As a theme, even for the rebirth of Terry and the sacrifice of Charley and all those things rolled up into this story, I think it just works in a very subtle but brilliant way. You could watch the movie and not feel like, oh, I have to go to church now. I'm converted. I've seen the light. Like, no, you've been entertained and you've been kind of enlightened. And that's kind of what the Bible does too. It's morality stories. It's not to be taken literally. It's a guide. And that's what I think Father Barry's function is in this film.
Yeah, he does what any priest should do.
The first time I saw this movie, I was just taking it in and enjoying it, and it was a great ride. The second time I watched it, I couldn't help but think, man, and you had touched on this in the video. This is like Rocky. It's a guy doing low level stuff for like these hoods, and he's got a heart of gold. Though it just doesn't know it yet. He's a boxer. He falls in love with this woman, and big broad strokes there that are obviously taken from the palette of this movie. And then today I'm thinking about it more. I said, oh my God, two of the most influential boxing movies of all time were influenced by this and Raging Bull.
Yep.
And the funny thing about that is Terry never puts on gloves in this movie. We just know he's a boxer, but two of the biggest boxing movies in movie history have taken and been influenced by this movie. So that says something. It's, I guess, to the legacy and to the reach and what it's done to filmmakers like Stallone, like Scorsese, so hats off.
And even, like, yes, the boxing, but also even in terms of crime, corruption, that presentation on film, the realism that's captured in this movie. I know for a fact that this is Spike Lee's favorite movie of all time.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, when you think about that, and then in terms of like his filmography and the realism that he pursues in his movies, it all comes back to On the Waterfront, and then even just the relationships that he tries to explore in his movies and the connections between the characters. It's like, yeah, that's, once you know that and then you watch it, you can see it. So that just goes to show like the ripple effect of this movie. It goes in directions you wouldn't even expect or realize until it's pointed out to you.
But that's a sign of a good story, right? Because we're still talking about it. You're still discussing it and say, oh, that could be that. Well, that could be that. Well, that could. And then, you've got something that's going to obviously endure the test of time because it's classic film that, and not just classic in the sense that it's old. Because I feel like sometimes like people say classic, but they just mean, oh, it's old. But no, this is classic in the sense of it's a classic film.
I think classic really means it spans time. You're talking about it in its day. You're talking about it, 10 years later, 20 years later, 30, 40, 50, 60. This is the 70th anniversary of this film. It was 1954 and we're in 2024 and we're still talking about it. So yes, a lot of people probably consider a classic as old, but I prefer to think of a classic as something that spans time, something that you're going to revisit and it will be and remain relevant through time, or enjoyable or entertaining through time. It's not going to be dated so heavily that it cannot be accessible.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that'll about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We will be discussing a brand new film next time, so be sure to head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss any of those selections. You can catch Steve and Bendler over at Steve's Pop Culture Corner on Instagram. Anne and I, of course, are also on Instagram as well as Letterboxd, so you can follow us over there and find out what we've been watching and what we think. And until next time, be a contender.